In the gospel leading up to the nativity story at Christmas, we hear about Joseph's dilemma, how he was engaged to a young girl in his village named Mary and learns that she is pregnant. He decides to do the right thing, which was simply to divorce or dismiss her quietly. But while he's mulling this over, he has a dream. And in that dream, God conspires with Joseph to take a very radical action, very much outside the social norm of his society. We know from our lives and even from the billboard or the bumper sticker that Jesus saves. But before Jesus saves, Joseph has to save the child Jesus before Jesus is born. Joseph the dreamer, Mary's fiancé, he was not the first dreamer to take center stage in the biblical story. And there are plenty of scholars who believe that Joseph, whose ancestor was David, and before David, all the way back to Abraham and Jacob, who later became Israel, and Jacob's 12 sons. The next to the youngest, of course, was named Joseph. And some of you who are old enough to remember the 1960s and 70s remember a musical called Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat. It was actually the very first collaboration between Lloyd Webber and Rice to create a musical version of the Bible. It preceded actually Jesus Christ Superstar, even though Superstar certainly outshone it in public. But many of you probably have sung Joseph the Technicolor Dreamcoat. According to that a source of information, Wikipedia, Joseph the Technicolor Dreamcoat has been performed by over 20,000 school and nonprofit and community groups. So you probably remember about Joseph, the first Joseph, the dreamer, and how he received that Technicolor Dreamcoat from his father as a sign of the father's favor. And as the youngest of the children at that point, before Benjamin was born, his brothers were jealous of Joseph, and it made it even worse when the youngest baby brother strutted his stuff in front of his older brothers and talked about the dreams that he had, right? In which all the other brothers were like sheaves of grain that bowed down to his sheaf of grain. And even worse, he told them about a dream when he was this bright shining star in the sky, and all the other stars, even the moon and sun, representing his parents, they all bow down to his star. And so, of course, as you remember, the older brothers came up with the plot to get rid of Joseph. He's sold off into slavery into Egypt, which is important in this story. And there in Egypt, he is imprisoned, and while imprisoned, the Pharaoh has some terrible dreams, and so he is introduced to the Pharaoh and is able to interpret the Pharaoh's dreams, which end up making Joseph second only to Pharaoh in Egypt, and would later save his people. There's the connection, that he would later save his people from starvation in Israel. And so we have these allusions to dreams, and we know that in Joseph's case, he was ready to set Mary aside quietly when God came to Joseph in a dream. Now, I'm sure that all of us dream dreams at various times, some of them waking dreams, some of them sleeping dreams. Many of the dreams we probably don't even remember, but some we do. Some may be more like nightmares, and some may be more like visions of what our life could be or what the world could be. Joseph dreams, first of all, that he should indeed go ahead and marry Mary, even though it was so foreign to social norms of the day, because the dreamer angel in the dream says that Mary has conceived of the Holy Spirit. In other words, God has conspired with Mary. and that she is pregnant with God's own life. And so, therefore, not only is it safe, but it is the right thing to do and the good thing to do for Joseph to follow the word of the angel in his dream and marry the young peasant girl Mary. But that was not the end of Joseph's dreams or Joseph saving Jesus, because, as you do recall later on in the story, after the child Jesus is born, the Holy Family has some very strange visitors from the east, those that we sometimes think of as wise men or magi who came from the east following the star. And when they found the place where the baby lay, they went in and worshiped the child Jesus and gave him gifts. And as they were about to leave and go back the way that they came, they were warned in a dream not to go back that way, because King Herod had it in for this young child Jesus. And soon after that, Joseph too was again visited by an angel in a dream that told Joseph to get up and take Mary and their child and flee to Egypt, because Herod was out to get them. And they remain in Egypt until once again an angel comes to Joseph in a dream and tells Joseph it's safe now to return back home to Judah. And so he does. So if we look at the larger biblical narrative, all the way from the very beginning stories in Genesis to the Gospels, according to Matthew and other gospel writers, we see that dreams play a crucial part in the way that God shows up in people's lives. I think it's fair to use that term conspire, that God conspires with humanity to bring about the redemption of the world. And while in our current political climate, conspiring or conspiracy has a very negative connotation, most simply means to breathe with. We know that respire, to respire, is to breathe. Well, conspire literally is to breathe along with. And so as we prepare ourselves once again to celebrate the birth of the Christ child and anticipate Christ coming again in our midst, I want to stir up your imagination about what it might be like for God to conspire with us, to breathe in us and through us and with us. Well, one of the ways that I have been trained to sit with, to vigil along with those who are nearing the very end of their lives, is to breathe with them. If you've had the experience of vigiling with somebody near the end of their lives, sometimes it is very peaceful, but other times there can be a certain agitation or anxiety. And sometimes, just like when we get anxious, their breathing might become very kind of short and shallow, and they're not really inspiring or respiring fully, right? I don't know about you, but I know sometimes if I'm more anxious, I tend not just to hold my breath, but not to fully expire. And so I begin to get, more and more anxious with that. And so the way that I was trained to help bring a sense of peace and calm with folks who might be breathing very anxiously is to first breathe along with them in their same rhythm, and then slowly begin to slow my own breath down. And oftentimes it happens that as I slow my breath down, the person who is anxious begins to slow their breath down as well, and eventually maybe enter into a time of greater peace and calm. It almost seems like magic, certainly a mystery, maybe even a miracle, that we can entrain or attune our breathing to others' breathing. But it makes sense, doesn't it? Knowing what it's like when we can calm and comfort a child who is hurting, and that we can soothe them with our voice and with our breath. And there's something about our human body and human mind about conspiring with another, beginning to breathe along with to be entrained or attuned to others' breathing. In fact, we can calm ourselves down in the same way. There's good research that shows that if we begin to breathe about 5 or 6 breaths a minute, in other words, a breath every 10 to 12 seconds, we can actually change our heart rate. Not only change our heart rate, but even change, our blood pressure and other things as well. So we can even attune or entrain our own hearts as well. So what might it look like in these days for God once again to dream with us? How many of us are prepared to dream along with God or to allow God to dream with us, to conspire with us, to know what it might mean today to once again welcome the Christ child into our midst? I think that's a mystery for each of us to be praying about, to be opening our lives to God about, and simply to be open to the various ways that God may be conspiring to invite us to join in God's own work, going about our daily lives, at home, at work, with the people that we shop with or the people that we see when we're out for appointments. How can we conspire to incarnate God's love to them? How can we perhaps even make that extra effort to step a little bit outside our comfort zone and help provide a welcoming place for others so that they know that God's love is intended for them as well? Well, some of you are aware that just 2 days ago, on Friday night the 16th, here in St. Paul's, in these spaces, here in our sanctuary and in John Wesley Hall, we hosted a gathering of Las Madres de Corazón, Mothers of Heart, a women's support group that's founded at the local elementary school, Lott Whitcomb Elementary. It's a group of 10 or 12 women, and they were here with other family members, about 40 or 50 altogether, gathered here in this space for a traditional posada. And I think I mentioned this last week, that literally the posada is kind of a place to rest your head. It's a lodging place. And the tradition, as you can well imagine, is recalling how Mary and Joseph, once they arrived in Bethlehem, were looking for a posada, looking for a place where they could rest and where Mary eventually could give birth as well. So it was a lot of fun. There was a wonderful feast here. After the feast, there was a reenactment of the posada. The sanctuary doors were closed, and half the group was on this side, inside the sanctuary, and the other group on the outside. And there was a call and response sung liturgy, really, of Mary and Joseph calling inside, asking to be welcomed into the sacred space. And eventually, as they sang through all the choruses, the doors were thrown open and everyone got to be together again. But that was just one of the hallmarks of this Posada celebration. After that, there was all kinds of jubilation. I really wish I could have had like a body cam on and shown all of you what it was like. I imagine it was probably the most raucous fun and laughter and joy that these rooms have seen in quite a while. And it was all ages, from a child under 1 year old up into the grandparents' 70s and 80s. And it was just an amazing, wonderful time. And it was wonderful to be able to open our doors to welcome, to provide a posada, a place to land and a place to rest for that celebration. So I'm curious for myself and wondering for our congregation what God may be dreaming for our future, how God may be conspiring with us for the next steps, for St. Paul's congregation to be a place where neighbors gather and celebrate God's love in their midst. So let us continue to conspire with God. Let us be God's dreamers. Let us be open to the ways that God is calling us, like Joseph and Mary, to help bring to birth, bring to light God's love in our world. Amen.